This build required two important breakthroughs to enable it. A breakthrough in the defense of your minions, and a breakthrough in a ridiculous combination that allows for absurd damage output with the Ring of Mendeln. And I know we've seen a lot of Ring of Mendeln builds before, but this new interaction literally breaks the game. You can see me one-shotting Uber Lilith in these clips. You can see me one-shotting elites at 100s. You can see hordes, packs of elites, one after another, dead, dead, dead. This build is crazy. I killed Uber Lilith at 96. By level 99, I was speed farming level 100 nightmare dungeons. This build is crazy. I became inspired to make this build after seeing a clip from a player named Sanity who one-shot Uber Lilith using the core mechanics that drive this build. I took the concept he started with and turned it into a build that could clear all content in the game with ease. This build's Paragon board is insane. The skill tree is crazy. You will never have seen another minion build that looks like this one. There is no Skeletal Mage Mastery, no Skeletal Warrior Mastery, no Golem. I am playing 0 damage reduction for my minions, not even the Dead Razor Glyph. I have 8 active skills. I have no vulnerable on corpse tendrils, and I'm even playing transfusion because it just wasn't weird enough yet. Before we can dive into the weirdness that makes this build able to clear 100s, we first have to talk about this mechanic that's been going around for the last couple of weeks, which is the interaction between Bone Prison, Corpse Explosion, and the Ring of Mendeln. I did a ton of testing to figure out exactly how this interaction works, and I can tell you that the interaction actually works quite differently than what most people think. Corpse Explosion has a lucky hit chance of 56%, and it also has an enchantment that turns it into a dot. If you know anything about lucky hits with dots, you know the lucky hit chance is supposed to be equally spread across the whole dot. However, with Corpse Explosion, it is actually applied to each tick of the dot, meaning every time the dot ticks, it's hitting with a lucky hit chance of 56%. This is an insane proc rate of lucky hit. In fact, the proc rate is so fast that our minions oftentimes cannot even keep up with it because their attack speed is too slow. And this is where Bone Prison comes into the picture. Bone Prison actually counts as minions. And with Ghastly Bone Prison, which causes the Bone Prison to apply vulnerable to enemies inside of it, this will actually proc the Mendeln damage. Not the lucky hit, but the actual damage from Mendeln. So what is happening here is our Corpse Explosion is proccing Mendeln repeatedly, sometimes 3, 4, 5 times a second. And the Bone Prison can actually keep up with the proc. So not only are we gaining extra minions from Bone Prison, but it's also able to proc the Mendeln way easier than normal minions are because they're limited by attack speed and Bone Prison isn't. So Bone Prison is constantly applying the damage from Mendeln, and Corpse Explosion is constantly proccing the Mendeln. And then we combine these two things with the Barber, and this is where we're getting the massive 200, 300 million damage hits. If you don't know, the Barber stores all of the damage that you deal to the target, and then the damage is dealt after several seconds in an AoE around it. So this is how we're able to deal such tremendous amounts of damage, and the damage is all dealt again in an AoE. It's so insane. But, how the hell do you keep minions alive in a 100? This has always been a missing piece of the puzzle, and one that we have struggled to solve for a long time. And I'm here to tell you how I solved it. I gave up. When I first started theory crafting this build, I gave my minions every piece of defense they could get. Every node, every glyph, every passive. I was even putting on aspects of my gear to try to make them tankier. And every time I would go into a 100, they would just die. And I realized that there was no way you could possibly keep them alive. And so I changed my approach. Instead of trying to give my minions armor and damage reduction, I decided, screw all of that. I am going to fully rely on Death's defense. Death's defense makes it so that your minions can't take more than 30% of their maximum life from a single damage instance. And then when you combine this with healing sources, you can actually make your minions crazy tanky because they can never take more than 30% of their max life in a hit, and you're constantly healing them. And yes, we're running the standard bonded in essence, right? Which is going to make our Skeletal Priest heal for 60% of our minions' maximum life every 5 seconds. But there's a key piece here that we've figured out that suddenly made our minions tanky enough to do 100s. And this was Corpse Tendrils with Blighted Corpse Tendrils to spawn Blood Orbs, and then this insane passive that I bet you some people don't even know exist, which is Transfusion. Transfusion is a passive that makes our Blood Orbs also heal our minions for up to 60% of the amount of the Blood Orb healing. So this is what's happening now. We go into a pack with our minions are getting hit, and they're getting hit for so much damage they could never possibly live, but Death's Defense restricts that damage to only be 30% of their maximum life. Then, because of constant healing from Bonded in Essence, from Skeletal Priest, and because our Corpse Tendrils is being cast all the time by us manually, and from our heart that automatically casts Corpse Tendrils, we're constantly spawning Blood Orbs and picking them up, and these Blood Orbs are pumping HP into our minions. And these two sources of healing, Transfusion and our Skeletal Priest, allow our minions to actually be able to survive in 100s with absolutely zero defense. This means we can take a full personal defense Paragon board as well as a full offense Paragon board, as we no longer have to care about the defense of our minions. We're also gaining extra skill points because we're no longer taking Skeletal Warrior Mastery or Skeletal Mage Mastery, since we don't care about their tankiness, and this allows us to invest in significantly more damage and survivability for our build. There are two key points that we need to address. The first is that if we're changing our Corpse Tendrils to spawn Blood Orbs, it means it's no longer applying Vulnerable. So where are we getting the Vulnerable from? Well, conveniently enough, the Bone Prison is giving us the Vulnerable. It's the rune that we need to take to get this interaction to work, so luckily we have our Vulnerable covered. The other thing we need to talk about is Shadow Mages. Why are we playing Shadow Mages, and why not the Aspect of Decay, which so many builds are running? The Aspect of Decay is going to increase the damage of our Shadow Blight, and it's going to cause our mages, with all their attacks and double attacks, to do a lot of damage with Shadow Blight, so why aren't we running it? Well, fundamentally, it just sucks. The Ring of Mendel is going to be virtually all of our damage. If you want to test this out, equip this build, run the Shadow stuff, take off the Ring of Mendel, and see how much damage the Shadow stuff is doing. It is almost nothing compared to the Ring of Mendel. The full Paragon board, as well as the full skill tree and aspect setup, is linked in the description below. But if you actually plan on playing this build, or you want to fully understand what is going on here, stay tuned, as we're going to discuss the next set of key interactions that makes this build work. There are 8 skills that are required to make this build function at its peak, but you can only have 6 skills on your bar. The solution to this is to autocast 2 of the skills so that you're able to use them without having them on your bar. We're going to be autocasting Decrepify with Decrepit Aura, the heart, that will automatically have an aura around us that applies Decrepify. And for Corpse Explosion, we're going to be running the Aspect of Explosion Mist, which will automatically cause our Blood Mist to cast Corpse Explosion and reduce its cooldown. This cooldown reduction on Blood Mist ends up being really important, as with the Decrepify Aura, we're able to constantly reduce the cooldown of Blood Mist, and we're going to be spending actually most of our time in fights inside of Blood Mist, completely immune to damage. To stay alive outside of Blood Mist, we're going to be running the full trio of aspects that enables our Bone Storm to turn into a defensive masterpiece. These are the Osseous Gale aspect, the aspect of Ultimate Shadow, and the aspect of Shielding Storm. It's important to know that the aspect of Shielding Storm does not work against enemies who are affected by Barber. However, this setup is still worth running, as we want to proc our lucky hit while we have Barrier, and the shield generation is actually still pretty decent, despite it not working for a large portion of the fight. Our stats on gear and our choices for weapon and offhand are vital for the functionality of this build. You need cooldown reduction and lucky hit while you have Barrier on both your helmet and your amulet. On your offhand, it's super essential that you have lucky hit while you have Barrier, cooldown reduction, and lucky hit chance, and you need to make sure that your offhand is a focus for inherent cooldown reduction. For the same reason, your main hand needs to be a wand, as a wand will give 15% lucky hit chance as an intrinsic property. You also need to make sure that you have lucky hit on your gloves, as well as critical strike chance, and on your ring, you want critical strike chance, critical strike damage, vulnerable damage, and lucky hit chance. We're stacking as much lucky hit chance as possible. Make sure your helmet, chest, and legs all have % armor, and then get as much tankiness as possible on your chest and your legs. You either need ranks of Blood Mist on your pants, or on your amulet you need ranks of Macabre skills. Prefer taking ranks of Macabre skills on your amulet, because this will affect both Bone Prison and Blood Mist, and then on your pants pick up an extra defensive slot, but ranks of Blood Mist on pants is a fine filler until you get a perfectly rolled amulet. I am always going to keep the build link below fully up to date, and that's where you're going to find the full list of Paragon, skills, and aspects, stat priorities, everything you want to know. It's all linked below. If you have any questions, feel free to check out my Twitch stream, and if you want to know the most current thing I'm doing, also check out my Twitch stream, or you can leave a comment down below asking me to clarify anything that was confusing. I hope you guys liked this video, and I'll see you in the next one.